Hello everybody, this is Brave Sir Robin coming to you from Parts Unknown. Here today with another DVD review. I know a few of you were expecting me to be reviewing this one today, The Best of Raven Nevermore. I made some promises that I would be doing it. I decided to postpone that for now though. I actually woke up this morning and I read some sad news that the wrestling world has lost another legend today. William Moody, aka Percy Pringle III, aka Paul Bearer, has passed away at the age of 58 years old. I was really sad to hear that. Watching him with The Undertaker was the highlight of many years throughout my young life, during my teenage years and a bit of my childhood years too, I guess. So I was really sad to hear that. I pretty much feel like we lost an icon and I lost a part of my childhood. So with that in mind, I want to pop in this DVD, to pop in some old school Undertaker matches and relive some of the previous glorious memories from this great era, and to see him and The Undertaker during their prime, at their best. So let's pop in this DVD and check it out. So right off the bat, I'm going to warn you right now, it's a re-release of an old Coliseum videotape that they just put on a DVD with nothing new added. It's still the same length with no special features or anything. Hosted by Ted DiBiase, who hosts it in character. And he mentions how he was the one who originally brought in The Undertaker as part of his Survivor Series team way back at 1990. But they don't really go into great detail about that. But they do mention how they built up the infamous, or maybe famous, Undertaker versus Undertaker match, which is the first match that's on this DVD. So let's pop it in and check it out and see what we all thought. So here we go, the first match, Undertaker versus Undertaker. I hope some of you old-time fans really remember this. I know a lot of people pointed this as something to mock, but I was actually watching during this time, and I've got some memories from this, where what the build-up to it, I think it was the Royal Rumble. There was a match between Undertaker and Yokozuna for the WWF title in a casket match, and Mr. Fuji and Jim Cornette paid off a bunch of heel wrestlers to come down and beat down the Undertaker. Like 10 people came down, beat him down, and Yokozuna won the match. They wheeled Undertaker's casket back to the back, and he disappeared, and he showed up in the Titantron, or whatever they called it at the time, and vowed to be back for his revenge. Meanwhile, before that happened, before he got his revenge on Yoko, Ted DiBiase started making claims during the summer that he was bringing back The Undertaker himself. And he brought out a fake Undertaker, which was played by primetime Brian Lee, fresh out of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, if I recall correctly. And they did a bunch of segments building up to this. They had Brian Lee fighting jobbers, like, while using all of Undertaker's moves, wearing the gray gloves at the time and doing all that stuff. And they did a bunch of segments as well where, for some reason, they brought in Leslie Nielsen from the Naked Gun and Airplane movies to be searching for The Undertaker. And there would be segments of like him going around talking to people. Apparently there were Undertaker sightings across the country. Like somebody would be sitting in a deli and then in walks The Undertaker and then reported. Apparently for that summer he was like WWF's version of Bigfoot for whatever reason. Sounds really silly, and yeah, it was really silly. Though I guess at my young age at the time, I was pretty captivated by it. I wasn't hard to please when it came to wrestling during this era. I grew up a WWF fan, and this never bothered me. It would now, but then it didn't. So now the actual match starts. They skip the fake Undertaker's entrance, and then they show Paul Bearer coming out, followed by some druids pushing a large casket. And I gotta be honest, I teared up a little watching Paul Bearer come down. I'm really sad to see him gone. So Paul Bearer comes down to ringside with the druids and the casket. He opens up the casket and smoke comes out. And he reaches in and takes out a large gold urn. The lights go out again, and Bearer opens the lid of the urn, shining it like a flashlight. And then the real Undertaker appears in the aisle and comes down. What excellent showmanship. You really can't say you weren't on the edge of your seat for stuff like this. So the two Undertakers face off. The real Undertaker is out there with his new look at the time, with the purple gloves. I guess that's so you can tell the two apart. And just him and Brian Lee face off, and it's very apparent how much taller that the real Undertaker is compared to Brian Lee. The match itself, it was pretty slow. It followed pretty much the basic Undertaker formula at the time, where like Undertaker would dominate for a bit at the start, the heel would do something dastardly, and then Undertaker would make his big comeback. Pretty normal at the time. A fake Undertaker would try to do some moves from the Undertaker's moveset, like chokeslam or the diving clothesline, or even the old school rope walk. I guess it wasn't really old school at this time, though, was it? But the real Taker would always counter, and then he'd end up pulling off the move himself immediately afterwards. He is the real deal, after all. So the match was pretty slow. The crowd wasn't really into it either, though. they were actually really silent throughout most of the match, which is too bad. It was the main event of this pay-per-view at the time, and this is way back before monthly pay-per-views, so any pay-per-view, you hate to hear silence in the main event. Vince McMahon tries to cover by saying that the crowd is stunned. But really, you could tell they were just waiting for the inevitable. You knew Undertaker was going to destroy this guy. So fake Undertaker hits a chokeslam, then a tombstone. Then he stalls before making a cover. And then both times Undertaker... Sorry, I messed up there. I'm not going back. He hits a chokeslam, then a tombstone, stalls before the cover. And then Undertaker does his Michael Myers sit-up once after the chokeslam and once after the tombstone. He goes for the second tombstone, but Undertaker kicks his legs and counters. You know the spot he does so many times where somebody's about to do it to him, kicks his legs, and he lands on his feet and plants the tombstone. Then rather than him do the cover, he picks up the fake Undertaker, tombstones him for the second time, picks him up once again, and hits a third tombstone. I really didn't remember him doing that. I didn't think it was up until his feud with Kane that he'd had to hit multiple finishers to put people away. So it was kind of cool to see. Too bad the character got swept under the rug, but I guess that pretty much showed this was a big deal that Taker was beating this guy. So when he gets the pin, the crowd finally reacts. Then afterwards, Undertaker goes after Ted DiBiase, who was at ringside, who runs to the back, and then places the fake Undertaker into the casket that was brought out earlier. The Druids then wheel the fake Undertaker to the back, never to be seen again, until years later that he returned as part of the Disciples of Apocalypse. So now for the next match, we have The Undertaker versus Kwang, a.k.a. Savio Vega, for those of you who don't know. So they made him a Puerto Rican ninja for whatever reason. Also wrestled as TNT in Puerto Rico. Don't many of you remember that. So the match itself, pretty much an extended squash. Kwang does get a bit of offense, but you never really think Undertaker is in any danger to be losing to Kwang. The match is clipped a bit too. Like at one point in the match, Undertaker misses his jumping clothesline and tumbles to the outside. Then the match jumps to him already back in the ring with Kwang wearing him down. It could be a commercial break because this match is an old WWF Raw match, or it could just be clipped for time. This tape is pretty short. It wasn't very long, and some of the matches are kind of clipped. So, of course, Undertaker starts the comeback, and he begins to no-sell Kwang's offense. He gets clotheslined over the top rope again, lands on his feet, slowly stalks back into the ring while Kwang is celebrating, and then Kwang rushes into Taker, who catches him with and then teases a chokeslam by holding him by the throat, like he usually does. Then Harvey Whippleman causes a distraction on the outside, which causes the referee to be looking at him, and Kwang spits green mist into Undertaker's face, though this does no good at all. This Undertaker then counters by spraying some mist of his own into Kwang's face, which makes no sense because Kwang was wearing a mask and his eyes are covered, so why would mist hurt him? But obviously it does hurt him because then Taker picks up the win after a chokeslam. Not a bad match. It was really strange seeing Undertaker doing the poison mist. I've never seen him doing that before or since. So it was pretty cool to see that. A cool novelty there. So next up, from Survivor Series 1994, is Undertaker versus Yokozuna in a classic casket match. This is Undertaker's revenge after getting destroyed by Yokozuna and 10 other guys the previous year to this, almost a year. And of course, to prevent such a thing from happening again, the Undertaker has a special guest enforcer on the outside. The star of Walker, Texas Ranger himself, Chuck Norris. So they're making it pretty clear that Yokozuna is afraid of the Undertaker and the casket, and Taker controls most of the early part of the match until Yoko counters the jumping clothesline with a Samoan drop. For those of you who don't remember, for such a big guy, Yoko was a pretty capable wrestler. He's probably one of the better big men in all of wrestling, in WWF history especially. It's a lot of teased attempts to get Yoko into the casket, but what's going on here? Including both guys fighting while they're standing in the casket. This leads to Mr. Fuji trying to interfere by pulling out Undertaker's hair. And while Undertaker goes after him, Jim Cornette tries to get involved and attack Undertaker with the tennis racket, but he gets laid out for his trouble. Even almost 20 years ago, Mr. Fuji's age was really showing, so it's really sad to see that. He was a devious wrestler back in his day. In this age, he could barely walk. I think he's in a wheelchair now, which is too bad. Though I guess the distraction was enough because Yokozuna does get back on the offense. Now there's a bit of clipping in this match, which is too bad. Last we saw, Yokozuna was back in control. Now Undertaker is back in control. They don't show what happened, and they finally show what they've been building up to the whole time, where several heel wrestlers are going to now attempt to interfere like they did the last time Undertaker and Yokozuna faced in a casket match. First out is the walking condominium himself, King Kong Bundy, but he's stopped in his tracks by Chuck Norris. So how about that? So he stares down Bundy, and Bundy stands there. He shakes his head and realizes, no, fuck that. I don't want none of Chuck Norris. I may have crippled Hulk Hogan back in the day, but Chuck Norris is too much for me. So he's followed out by the late great Bam Bam Bigelow, who maybe he'll even the odds. But no, he stops dead in his tracks too. No one fucks with Chuck Norris. So how about that? Though as intimidated as Chuck Norris is, he can't see everywhere as IRS comes through the crowd and attacks The Undertaker and beats him down, preventing him from putting Yokozuna into the casket. He beats Undertaker down, wears him down with a sleeper hold of all things. You never see that no more, while Chuck Norris remains oblivious. He rolls Undertaker into the casket and leaves through the crowd, but I guess Yokozuna has to close the lid himself to win this match, but he's too worn out from something we didn't see because the match was so clipped. Supposing I could have looked up the unaltered version on YouTube or something, but the way I'm justifying this is the DVD that I'm reviewing. I'm going to review the match as it's shown on this DVD. Maybe somewhere later I'll do a review of Survivor Series 1994. I don't own it, so that might not be for a while, but then I'll watch the match unaltered and I'll talk about it then. So if anybody asks, that's why. So Yoko eventually makes it to his feet, and he almost closes the lid on the casket. Undertaker rises to his feet and grabs Yoko by the throat to put a stop to that. While Undertaker is building up to the chokeslam, Double J Jeff Jarrett makes his way down to the ring. Don't mind that, he went off a little. Jeff Jarrett makes his way down to the ring, comes face to face with. And he's definitely not afraid of no Jeff Jarrett either, who he lays out with a thrust kick to the chest. And then instead of selling the kick to the chest, Jarrett just gets up and leaves. So whatever. Funny that he's the only one who actually took the kick from Chuck Norris. I guess everybody else was too worried to do that. Who knows? Or maybe they just didn't want to take a bump to a non-wrestler. Pretty standard now, but a lot of guys had their pride at this time. So, like I mentioned, I forgot to mention too, when IRS came out, this actually does lead to a match at the Royal Rumble which is the very next pay-per-view. So we do get a match between IRS and Undertaker a few months later. So yeah. So Jeff Jarrett makes his interference, Undertaker makes his comeback, hits Yokozuna with a DDT and then a big boot, which sends him tumbling backwards through the ropes and into the casket. For good measure, Undertaker then takes Mr. Fuji's Japanese flag, snaps it in two over his knee, and throws it into the casket with Yokozuna as well. I really wasn't aware there was any issue between the USA and Japan back in 1994, but if wrestling has taught me anything, I guess I was wrong on that. So Undertaker closes the lid, and yet another monster is vanquished. With help, of course, from Chuck Norris himself. So how about that? So now next up we have The Undertaker versus Jim the Anvil Neidhart, the father of WWE's Natalya, for you newer fans who may not realize that. He also has Owen Hart on his side, the late great Owen Hart. For some reason on commentary, this match is from WWE Superstars, which was the flagship show at the time up till Raw pretty much took it over. We have Vince and Jerry Lawler on commentary and building up the Survivor Series 1994 match with Undertaker and Yokozuna that we just watched, so the matches aren't even in chronological order. Same as the match with Quang, basically just another extended squash match where you never really thought that Undertaker was in any danger. Though Anvil does use his power to get to an advantage during the match, which leads to Paul Bearer leaving the ringside and heading to the back. And while he is gone, Anvil dominates for a bit until Paul Bearer comes back out, wheeling the casket that will be used at Survivor Series. He opens the lid of the casket, and Undertaker starts his comeback and nails Anvil with a big boot to the face. Anvil tumbles backwards through the ropes and into the casket. Him and Owen look shocked and act terrified. Anvil climbs out of the casket and freaks out, then runs away, and loses by countout. Okay, that was weird. But did Anvil not want to do a clean job and take the tombstone from Undertaker? I mean, what the hell was that about? Why is he so big? This match itself, it wasn't a bad match, I guess, but if there was anything I would have took off this DVD, it was probably this, because of the non-ending, and probably showed the Survivor Series match unedited instead. So the last match on the set is Undertaker versus Jerry Lawler in a casket match. I don't remember there being any storyline or build up to this match or anything that would cause it to be such a heated feud that it would lead to a casket match. But it's a Coliseum Video exclusive match, so I'm not going to complain about that. Sometimes wrestlers would just have matches for the sake of having matches, and they'd be taped from house shows or dark matches from Superstars or even Raw tapings, I guess, and they would show them on Coliseum Video and sell tapes of that. I kind of miss that. Coliseum Videos were kind of cool. I loved renting and buying those back in the day. So right off the bat, Lawler goes after Paul Bearer, who then opens up the air and shines the light into Jerry Lawler's face, blinding him, which leads to Taker landing a couple punches. Some more stalling from Lawler. He stalls quite a bit in this match. He reaches into his tights and he takes out some unseen foreign object that we never get a look at. But of course there's no DQ, so I don't know why he's hiding it. I don't see why he needs to. He wears Taker down with some punches of his own, but naturally Undertaker, he's unfazed and he comes back anyway. So Lawler goes into his tights again, and Gorilla Monsoon points out in commentary how there was a fan in the crowd who managed to take a picture and suggests having a referee or somebody run down to that fan and get that picture so they can tell if Lawler is cheating or not in a no DQ match. Stan Lane, who's also on commentary, seems just running down to the ringside with a Polaroid camera so they can catch Lawler cheating. Really? Even aside that the fact that this match is a no DQ match, have you ever seen any match where somebody goes out and takes a picture of somebody cheating and says, "Hey ref, look," and the referee says, "Oh, look at that picture, seems legit to me," and then ends the match? That'd be kind of weird and pretty weak. I don't know what Gorilla and Stan Lane are thinking here. So this leads to Lawler getting the advantage again with his foreign object, or international object, as sometimes was known at the time. He manages to kick Undertaker into the casket. Stupidly doesn't close the lid, though, and he celebrates for a bit. This leads to Undertaker getting revived, of course, as he always does, making his way out of the casket and dominating Lawler again, who once again goes to his international object. This time Undertaker catches the fist as Lawler goes for a punch and nails Lawler with a kick to the gut, which Stan Lane refers to as an ample midsection, and then Gorilla Monsoon points out how Lawler doesn't miss too many meals. Really, I'm surprised to hear that, and they even make some Burger King references. This kind of goes to show, like, back at this era, like, in the mid-90s like this, when Lawler first came into the WWF, he was really hated. Like, a lot of people really hated him from stuff that happened to them back in the Memphis territory. I'll probably go back into a little detail about that. There was a funny story in one of the Percy Pringle shoot interviews where he actually confirms that he stood guard while Steve Kern, a.k.a. Skinner, took a dump into Jerry Lawler's crown before the Royal Rumble. So how about that? So I guess maybe that's where Stan Lane and Gorilla are coming from. Maybe they're just taking shots at Lawler because they hate him too. That's my guess. So Lawler puts a stop to Undertaker's offense, though, with a low blow, which during this kid-friendly era was actually kind of rare at the time. I remember when I was watching this originally, like back in the 90s, I was actually surprised to see somebody do that in wrestling. You know, it makes sense that they would in a no-DQ match, but you never saw it. So Stan Lane, he makes some snide remarks about Lawler's tights for some reason, but then gets cut off when Undertaker lifts Lawler up for the tombstone and nails it. Undertaker then calls for the lid for the casket to be opened, starts to roll Lawler into the casket, but stops right at the ring apron. For some reason, he puts his forearm over Jerry Lawler's throat, and he's almost grinding a bit, or even choking him a bit. There's actually a story here. Like, when you're watching this and you didn't know this, you wouldn't think much of it, but it does seem kind of weird. According to Percy Pringle's ROH shoot interview, I can't find the exact story. He's got 2 shoot interviews. I didn't want to go through both of them just to look for one story. They're about 3 hours each. But apparently because of some incident in Memphis or something like that, it led to something where Jerry Lawler told Undertaker he was no longer welcome there or something like that. I don't know why. I can't remember the exact details. I can't find it on YouTube either. But this is Undertaker getting his revenge. So while he's got Lawler prone on the ring apron, he puts his forearm over his throat, kind of grinding a bit. You can almost hear him muttering too. He's saying, "Please, Lawler, can I go back to Memphis?" And Lawler's like, "No." Oh, he's looking all spitey and pissed off. And like, apparently, you can hear it faintly too, like if you know what you're looking for. So it was kind of funny to see. I've never noticed before. It just looks kind of weird that he just stops, rolling him into the casket. Then he rolls him into the casket anyway after so long anyway. After I guess he feels he punished Lawler enough. And they didn't even edit it off the original release, so how about that? So he rolls Lawler into the casket after he says, "Fine, you can go back to Memphis." So he rolls him in, and then Undertaker wins the match, of course. It was kind of a strange casket match to see. Up till this point, the only casket matches you saw, I think, were like Yokozuna, Kamala, maybe Mabel, and Kama Mustafa at the time, but it's funny to see somebody like Lawler in there who's doing a Weasley running away act rather than the monster thing like Undertaker was so used to. Good little match, though. I can't help but wonder, though, what would this match have been like during Lawler's territory days on his Memphis territory when Lawler was the dominating superface at the time and Undertaker probably would have been a conquering monster. Would have been interesting to see, and that's a match I would like to see someday. I'm pretty sure the two probably crossed paths. Well, they obviously did for Undertaker to do this to him. I'd like to come across a match like that and check it out someday. So then the last match ends, and Ted DiBiase brings this DVD to a close. So there's my review of Undertaker. He buries them alive. Not a bad little disc. It's only about not even an hour long. If you could look for it pretty easily. I don't think it's in print anymore, but it's not hard to find. You could probably even find the original VHS tape, which is unaltered. DVD, the video quality would probably be a bit better. If you're going to watch some Undertaker as well, there's also some other great DVDs he's on, like Undertaker 15-0, Tombstone, History of the Undertaker, Undertaker's Deadliest Matches, and Undertaker 20-0, The Streak. The reason I selected this one, I actually wanted to review a DVD that had him with Paul Bearer throughout all of the matches on there, so I didn't really have to go into big detail about the era without him. The reason I felt like doing this was out of tribute to Paul Bearer. And I just wanted to say, those of us here hosting, like myself and my friends, I'm sure we all wish our condolences to the family of Bill Moody. And I just want to, if any of them ever watch this, or anybody with any connection, his contributions to wrestling will be missed. And watching him and The Undertaker together was such a huge part of my childhood at this time. Like, I have fond memories of watching them weekly during this era, and it's really sad to hear that he's passed away. He's lived a great life, though, and he will be remembered for always. Rest in peace, Bill Moody, William Moody, Percy Pringle, Paul Bearer, whatever you want to be known as. Thank you so much for the memories, and you'll always be remembered by me watching stuff like this. It'd be great to see. So until next time, if anybody wants to, leave some comments about Paul Bearer. I'd love to hear anybody's favorite memories about him. He will be missed. Like I said, there was a couple times watching this, I saw him walking down the aisle, and I felt a bit bad. I'd like to hear anybody else's thoughts. So feel free to leave a comment. You can subscribe on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, or subscribe on YouTube as well. So until next time, I'll probably be back with the best of Raven like I promised, and probably some other stuff that I got planned to do too. So until then, catch y'all later.